The observation deck of the Galactic Council station hummed with the low vibration of thousands of life support systems, each calibrated for the dozens of species that called this place home. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, stars wheeled slowly in their ancient dance, indifferent to the political machinations that unfolded within the station's corridors. Commander Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cool surface, watching her reflection overlap with the cosmos beyond. "You're late for the briefing." She didn't turn at the sound of the voice. She knew it belonged to Admiral Reeves, her superior and one of the few humans who had earned respect among the galactic community through sheer force of will and decades of service. His footsteps were measured, deliberate, the gait of a man who had learned to move carefully in a universe that viewed his species as dangerous anomalies. "I needed a moment," Sarah replied, finally, turning to face him. The Admiral's weathered face bore the familiar lines of someone who had spent too many years making decisions that cost lives. His uniform was impeccable, every insignia perfectly placed, every crease sharp enough to cut. It was armor, she realized, not against physical threats, but against the constant scrutiny of alien eyes that searched for any sign of the savage nature they believed lurked beneath every human civilized veneer. "The Zalani delegation is asking questions," Admiral Reeves said, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken implications. "About you specifically." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The Zalani were among the most influential species in the Council, their crystalline minds capable of processing information at speeds that made human thought seem glacial. They were also among the most vocal critics of humanity's inclusion in galactic society. To them, humans were a barely contained disaster waiting to happen, a species that had turned their own world into a battlefield before reaching for the stars. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest they've been researching your service record." The Admiral moved to stand beside her at the viewport, his reflection joining hers in the starfield. "Your actions on Kepler 442b. The incident with the Thrak Raiders. The way you handled the hostage situation on Proxima Station." Each mention hit Sarah like a physical blow. Every decision, every moment of violence that had been necessary to protect innocent lives, now dissected and analyzed by minds that could never understand the weight of human choice. She had sealed herself in armor long ago, emotional barriers that allowed her to function in a universe that constantly reminded her of her species' reputation. But the Zalani had a talent for finding cracks. "They want to know if I can be trusted," she said. It wasn't a question. "They want to know if any of us can be trusted." Admiral Reeves' voice carried a bitter edge. "Ambassador Clara has been particularly vocal about the human problem in recent sessions. She's convinced that our capacity for violence makes us inherently unstable partners." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of her species' burden. Every human who served in galactic society carried it, the constant need to prove that they were more than the sum of their aggressive instincts, that civilization could triumph over the evolutionary drives that had carried them from Earth's cradles to the stars. It was exhausting, this perpetual performance of harmlessness for an audience that would never truly believe in their redemption. "The briefing," she said finally. "What's it about?" "Joint operation. Deep space reconnaissance mission to the void sectors. 3 ships, mixed crews." The Admiral's tone suggested he found the assignment as appealing as a particularly virulent plague. "The Council wants to demonstrate interspecies cooperation. They've specifically requested human participation." "And they want me to lead it?" "They want you to prove that humans can be trusted with command authority over non-human crews." He paused, studying her reflection in the viewport. "Sarah, this isn't just another mission. This is a test. Fail, and they'll have all the justification they need to restrict human participation in Council operations." The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar coat. She had worn it for so long that its absence would have felt strange. Every human in galactic service carried the hopes and fears of their entire species, but command officers bore an additional burden. They were the face of humanity, the living embodiment of their people's worthiness to stand among the stars. "Who's on the cruise?" "Mixed bag. Zalani navigation specialists, Corvan engineers, a few Altair scientists. And..." He hesitated. "Dr. Zara Veltai." Sarah's blood ran cold. Dr. Veltai was a Zelani xenopsychologist who had made a career of studying human behavioral patterns. Her papers on human aggression and violence had been instrumental in shaping galactic opinion about her species. If Veltai was part of this mission, then it wasn't just a test, it was a trap.
She'll be watching every move I make, Sarah said.
Yes. And documenting it for the council. The Admiral's reflection met her eyes in the viewport.
Sarah, I won't lie to you. This mission could end your career.
It could end all of our careers. But if you succeed, if you can prove that humans can be trusted with the lives of other species,
it could change everything. She understood. The mission wasn't about exploration or reconnaissance.
It was about the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. The weak version of yourself would refuse, Admiral Reeves said quietly. The version that's afraid of failure, afraid of judgment, afraid of bearing the weight of an entire species' hopes.
But that version died long ago, didn't it? Sarah nodded slowly.
She had killed that version of herself years ago, piece by piece, decision by decision. Every time she had chosen duty over fear, every time she had accepted responsibility that others would have fled from, she had carved away another portion of the person she had once been.
The woman who stood at this viewport was forged from necessity and tempered by sacrifice. When do we deploy? 72 hours. Your ship is the UES Indomitable. Dr. Veltai will be aboard as the mission's xenopsychological specialist.
He turned from the viewport, his expression grave. Sarah, she's not just there to observe.
She's there to find evidence of human instability. Don't give her any.
As the Admiral's footsteps faded down the corridor, Sarah remained at the viewport, her reflection staring back at her from the infinite darkness.
The stars offered no counsel, no easy answers.
They simply burned, as they had for billions of years, indifferent to the struggles of the small, violent species that had crawled from their gravity well to challenge the established order of things. She thought about trust, what it meant, how it was earned, how it could be destroyed by a single moment of weakness.
The galaxy saw humans as fundamentally untrustworthy, creatures whose cooperative instincts were overshadowed by their capacity for violence.
Every human who served among the stars carried the burden of disproving that assessment, one interaction at a time.
But trust, Sarah knew, was not something that could be demanded or even earned through perfect behavior. It was a gift, freely given, and those who expected to receive it were often the least worthy of it. The galaxy would never trust humans completely, not because humans were untrustworthy, but because trust required vulnerability, and the established powers of the galactic community were too comfortable in their superiority to allow themselves that weakness. The irony was not lost on her. In their quest to prove their trustworthiness, humans had become the most reliable species in the galaxy. They kept their word because breaking it carried consequences far beyond personal failure. They honored their commitments because their species' survival depended on it. They had transformed their greatest weakness, their reputation for violence, into their greatest strength by mastering it so completely that their restraint became legendary. Sarah straightened, adjusting her uniform with practiced precision. The armor was more than fabric and insignia, it was the accumulated weight of every human who had served before her, every sacrifice that had been made to secure humanity's place among the stars. She wore their hopes and fears, their triumphs and failures, their unshakable determination to prove that evolution was not destiny. 72 hours to prepare for a mission that would determine the future of human participation in galactic society. 72 hours to ready herself for the scrutiny of minds that could process her every thought and gesture, searching for evidence of the savage nature they believed lurked beneath her civilized exterior. She smiled grimly at her reflection. Let them look. The weak version of herself, the one that feared judgment, that craved acceptance, that would have bent herself into whatever shape others demanded, was long dead. In her place stood someone harder, more disciplined, more worthy of the trust that others were so reluctant to grant. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. The phrase echoed in her mind as she finally turned away from the viewport, her reflection dissolving into the starfield. She had work to do. Part 2, testing the boundaries. The UES Indomitable hung in space like a predator poised to strike. Her hull was sleek black ceramic composite,
designed to absorb sensor sweeps and minimize her electromagnetic signature. She was built for reconnaissance, but her line suggested violence, a fact that was not lost on the mixed crew gathering in her bays.
Sarah stood in the primary docking port, watching as the non-human crew members boarded.
Each species moved with their own particular grace, the Zilani with their fluid, crystalline precision, the Corvan with their heavy, deliberate gait, the Altair with their quick, bird-like movements. All of them were accomplished professionals, the best their species had to offer. All of them were here to watch her fail.
Commander Chen.
The voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, each syllable perfectly modulated.
Sarah turned to face Dr. Zara Veltai, the Zilani xenopsychologist whose reputation preceded her like a curse.
Dr. Veltai stood nearly 7 feet tall, her translucent skin revealing the complex crystalline structures that served as her nervous system. Her face was hauntingly beautiful in the way that geometric perfection could be, all sharp angles and flowing curves. But her eyes, multifaceted like a cut gemstone, held no warmth. They were the eyes of a scientist studying a particularly interesting specimen.
Dr. Veltai, Sarah replied, keeping her voice level and professional. Welcome aboard the Indomitable.
Thank you. The Zilani's head tilted slightly, a gesture that Sarah had learned indicated deep analysis. I have reviewed your service record with great interest. Your tactical decisions on Kepler 442b were illuminating. There it was, the first probe. Kepler 442b had been a disaster, a colony under siege by raiders that couldn't be evacuated in time. Sarah's solution had been characteristically human. Instead of retreating, she had turned her ship into a weapon, using its mass and velocity to eliminate the raider fleet in a single, devastating impact. It had saved the colony, but the brutal efficiency of her tactics had shocked the galactic community.
The colonists survived, Sarah said simply.
Yes.
All 40,000 of them.
Dr. Veltai's voice carried no inflection, but Sarah could sense the weight of analysis behind her words. Your willingness to sacrifice your ship and risk your crew to save civilian lives was unexpected.
Unexpected how?
The standard Zilani response would have been to calculate acceptable losses and preserve fleet assets for future operations.
The mathematical optimization would have suggested abandoning the colony.
Dr. Veltai moved closer, her crystalline skin refracting the corridor lights into prismatic patterns. But humans frequently choose suboptimal solutions that prioritize emotional satisfaction over logical outcomes. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the response to being dissected like a laboratory animal. But she had learned to use that anger, to forge it into something sharper than rage.
Perhaps Zilani mathematics don't account for all variables.
Such as
trust, morale, the knowledge that your command will never abandon you.
Sarah stepped closer to the Zilani, noting how Dr. Veltai's multifaceted eyes tracked her every movement.
40,000 people are alive because they knew a human commander would die before leaving them behind.
That knowledge affects how they serve, how they fight, how they trust.
An interesting perspective.
Dr. Veltai's head tilted again.
You believe that irrational loyalty generates tactical advantages that outweigh its computational costs.
I believe that loyalty isn't irrational when it's earned. The moment stretched between them, two fundamentally different forms of intelligence measuring each other. Sarah could feel the weight of observation, not just from Dr. Veltai but from the other crew members who had paused in their boarding procedures to witness this first exchange. Every word, every gesture, every micro-expression would be catalogued and analyzed. I look forward to observing your command methodology during our mission, Dr. Veltai said finally.
The void sectors should provide ample opportunities to study human decision-making under stress.
As the Zilani moved deeper into the ship, Sarah remained in the docking bay, greeting the rest of her crew. Chief Engineer Korvac was a mountain of a being. His species evolved in heavy gravity environments that had given them incredible strength and endurance.
His massive hands could delicately calibrate a plasma manifold or crush titanium like paper.
When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone.
Commander, he rumbled, offering the Corvan equivalent of a salute.
I have reviewed your ship's specifications.
The human design philosophy is aggressive.
The Indomitable was built for reconnaissance in hostile territory, Sarah replied.
Sometimes aggression is a survival trait. Indeed.
Korvac's deep-set eyes studied her with the intensity of someone accustomed to measuring stress tolerances. I am curious to see how human aggressive instincts translate to leadership of mixed crews.
Another test, another probe.
Sarah was beginning to understand the true nature of this mission. Each crew member had been selected not just for their expertise, but for their ability to observe and analyze human behavior. She was commanding a ship full of scientists whose primary subject was herself. The final boarding group included the Altair specialists, Dr. Lyrics, the expedition's xenogeologist, and Commander Skrix, a fleet liaison whose species had first contact protocols dating back millennia. The Altair were ancient, their civilization old when humans were still discovering fire. They moved with the quick, precise motions of their avian ancestors, their feathered crests betraying emotional states that their controlled voices concealed. Commander Chen, Commander Skrix said, his crest rising slightly in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of wary respect. The Altair Fleet Command has great interest in this mission's outcome.
As do we all, Sarah replied. She could see the pattern now. Every major galactic power had representation on this crew.
The Zilani with their mathematical precision, the Corvan with their industrial might, the Altair with their ancient wisdom.
Each would return to their respective governments with reports on human command capability. Bridge officers, report to stations, Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. All departments, prepare for departure. We launch in 6 hours.
The next several hours passed in a blur of pre-flight preparations. Sarah moved through her ship like a conductor orchestrating a complex symphony, ensuring that every system was optimized, every crew member properly integrated, every potential point of failure identified and addressed. It was methodical, thorough work, the kind of systematic preparation that had kept human crews alive in environments that should have killed them. But, beneath the professional efficiency, Sarah was acutely aware of being watched.
Dr.
Veltai seemed to appear in every compartment she visited, observing her interactions with crew members, documenting her decision-making process. The Zilani's presence was not intrusive, she was too skilled for that, but it was constant, like a weight pressing against Sarah's consciousness.
Commander. The voice belonged to her human XO, Lieutenant Marcus Webb.
He approached with the easy confidence of someone who had served under her command before, someone who understood the particular pressures she was facing.
Final systems check is complete. All departments report ready for departure. Thank you, Marcus.
She kept her voice low, professional.
Even her interactions with her human crew members would be scrutinized for signs of favoritism or tribal loyalty. Any concerns from the department heads? Chief Korvac mentioned some differences in engineering philosophy between human and Corvan safety protocols.
Nothing critical, but he wanted it noted for the record. Marcus's expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah could see the understanding in his eyes. He knew, as she did, that every minor friction would be magnified under the lens of galactic scrutiny.
Dr. Veltai? She's established a monitoring station on Deck 3. Full sensor suite, direct feeds from the bridge and engineering. Marcus paused.
She's also requested access to crew psychological profiles and stress response data.
Granted. Complete transparency. Sarah's decision was immediate, instinctive. She can have access to anything she wants. No restrictions. Marcus raised an eyebrow.
Sarah, some of those files contain, I know what they contain. Her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Our strength isn't in hiding our flaws, Marcus. It's in mastering them so completely that they become irrelevant. The Bridge of the Indomitable was a masterpiece of human engineering philosophy: clean lines, intuitive interfaces, redundant systems designed to function under battle conditions. Sarah settled into the command chair, feeling the ship's systems integrate with her neural implants. The interface was seamless, natural, as if the ship were an extension of her own body.
All stations report ready, Lieutenant Webb announced from the XO position.
Dr. Veltai to bridge, came the crystalline voice over the comm system.
Go ahead, Doctor. I am curious about human command protocols. In Zalani fleet operations, all major decisions are reviewed by committee consensus before implementation. How do humans ensure optimal decision-making? Sarah smiled grimly. Another test, this one probing the human tendency toward individual authority rather than collective analysis.
In human fleet operations, the commander bears full responsibility for mission success or failure.
This creates accountability that committee consensus cannot match. But, what prevents commanders from making suboptimal decisions based on emotional responses or cognitive biases? Training, experience,
and the knowledge that failure means death for yourself and everyone under your command. Sarah's voice carried across the bridge, ensuring that every crew member could hear her response.
We don't try to eliminate human nature, Doctor. We harness it. Fascinating.
Please proceed with departure when ready.
Navigation, plot course for the void sectors, maximum efficiency route. Sarah's orders came with crisp precision. Engineering, bring the main drive online.
All hands, prepare for departure. The Indomitable responded like a living thing, her systems humming with barely contained power.
Through the bridge viewport, the council station fell away, its lights dwindling against the cosmic backdrop.
Sarah felt the familiar mix of anticipation and responsibility that came with taking a ship into unknown space. Commander, Dr. Lyrics spoke from the science station, his feathered crest showing subtle signs of unease. The void sectors are largely unexplored.
Our knowledge is limited to long-range sensor data and automated probe telemetry.
Which is why we're going there, Doctor.
Sarah's response was matter of fact. The galaxy is vast, and there's still much we don't understand. Sometimes you have to step into the unknown to find answers. A typically human approach, Commander Scrix observed from his liaison position.
The Altair prefer exhaustive analysis before committing resources to exploration.
Analysis has its place, Sarah agreed. But, there comes a point where you have to act on incomplete information. The key is making sure you're prepared for whatever you might find.
She could feel the weight of judgment in those words, the careful evaluation of her command philosophy by minds that operated on fundamentally different principles.
The Zalani sought mathematical optimization.
The Corvin valued systematic redundancy.
The Altair preferred patient observation.
Only humans seemed comfortable with the idea of diving into uncertainty with nothing but skill and determination to guide them.
Jump point reached, navigation reported. Ready for hyperspace transition. All stations, confirm readiness.
The responses came back in order: engineering, navigation, tactical, science. Each department had acknowledged their status with the professionalism of experienced officers, but Sarah could hear the underlying tension.
They were embarking on a mission that was about more than exploration.
They were testing the fundamental assumptions about what humanity could offer to galactic civilization.
Execute jump. Reality twisted as the Indomitable entered hyperspace, the familiar sensation of stepping sideways through the universe.
Sarah had made the transition hundreds of times, but she never lost her appreciation for the sheer audacity of it, the human refusal to accept natural limitations, the willingness to tear holes in spacetime itself to reach for the stars. In hyperspace, the ship became a bubble of structured reality surrounded by chaos. It would be a 3-day journey to the void sectors, 3 days of enforced proximity with a crew that was simultaneously her responsibility and her judges. 3 days to prove that humans could be trusted with the lives of other species. As the ship settled into its hyperspace trajectory, Sarah leaned back in her command chair, her awareness expanding to encompass every system, every crew member, every potential point of failure. The weak version of herself would have been paralyzed by the weight of scrutiny, desperate to prove herself worthy of acceptance. But that version was dead, killed by years of decisions that had forged her into something harder. She was no longer trying to prove that humans deserved trust. She was demonstrating why they had earned it. Part 3, the crucible of truth. The void sectors stretched before them like a cosmic graveyard, vast regions of space where stellar formation had failed and ancient civilizations had left only whispers of their passing. Long-range sensors detected anomalous readings scattered across hundreds of light-years, energy signatures that defied classification,
gravitational distortions that suggested technologies beyond current understanding. It was exactly the kind of mystery that drew explorers and terrified administrators. Sarah stood in the ship's main laboratory, watching Dr. Veltai analyze the preliminary data with the focused intensity that defined her species. The Zelani's crystalline skin pulsed with patterns of light as her enhanced nervous system processed information at superhuman speeds. Beside her, Dr. Lyrix pecked at his instruments with quick, precise movements, while Chief Korvac manipulated holographic displays with surprising delicacy for such massive hands. The energy patterns are consistent with artificial origins, Dr. Lyrix reported, his feathered crest betraying excitement despite his controlled tone. But, the technology appears to be orders of magnitude beyond anything in our databases. Age estimates suggest the sources are at least 50,000 years old, Dr. Veltai added. Possibly older. We are looking at the remnants of a civilization that achieved technological transcendence before most current species developed written language. Sarah studied the data streams flowing across the laboratory displays. The readings were indeed extraordinary power signatures that suggested the ability to manipulate matter at the quantum level, gravitational effects that indicated mastery of spacetime itself. Whatever species had created these artifacts had achieved a level of technological sophistication that made current galactic civilization look primitive. Chief Korvac, can our sensors penetrate the interference fields around these sites? The massive Corvan engineer rumbled thoughtfully as he manipulated the sensor data. Standard protocols are insufficient. The interference appears to be designed to prevent analysis. However, he paused, his deep-set eyes focusing on Sarah with surprising intensity. Human sensor technology includes adaptive algorithms that might penetrate defensive systems. The approach is more aggressive than standard exploration protocols. Another test. Every decision was being evaluated for evidence of human instability. Sarah could feel Dr. Veltai's attention sharpen, ready to document any choice that might suggest dangerous recklessness. The safe option would be to maintain distance, gather data from afar, report back to the Council for further analysis. It was what any reasonable commander would do. Initiate penetrative sensor sweeps, Sarah ordered. Full spectrum analysis. I want to know what we're dealing with. Commander Scrix interjected, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia of caution. The prudent approach would be to establish a safe observation distance, and the prudent approach has left these mysteries unsolved for 50,000 years. Sarah's response was firm but not dismissive. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks to achieve meaningful results. She moved to the central console, her hands dancing over the controls with practiced efficiency. The indomitable sensor array was indeed more aggressive than standard exploration equipment designed to penetrate hostile environments and gather intelligence under combat conditions. It was typically human, she realized, technology that assumed conflict and prepared accordingly. Sensors online, Lieutenant Webb reported from his position. Adaptive algorithms are compensating for interference fields. We're getting clean readings from the primary anomaly site. The holographic display filled with data that made everyone in the laboratory fall silent. Before them hung the ghostly outline of a structure that defied easy categorization, part space station, part artifact, part something else entirely. It was massive, easily the size of a small moon, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow as they watched. Incredible, Dr. Lyrix breathed. The mathematical complexity is beyond our current theoretical frameworks. Not beyond them, Dr. Veltai corrected, her crystalline skin pulsing with rapid light patterns as her mind raced through calculations. The patterns are recognizable as extensions of known mathematical principles, but, taken to extremes we have never contemplated. This represents not just technological advancement, but a fundamental understanding of reality itself. Sarah studied the artifact with growing unease. Something about its design triggered instinctive alarms, patterns that suggested not just advanced technology, but active systems. Are we looking at ruins, or is this thing still functional? Unknown, Chief Korvac rumbled. Power readings are minimal, but that could indicate efficient energy utilization rather than dormancy. I would need closer proximity to make accurate assessments. How close? Within 1,000 kilometers for detailed analysis.
Closer for thorough investigation.
The laboratory fell silent as the implications sank in.
1,000 kilometers was point-blank range in space terms, close enough that if the artifact proved hostile, escape would be impossible. It was exactly the kind of risk that Galactic Protocol discouraged, the sort of aggressive approach that confirmed alien suspicions about human recklessness. Sarah felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. Every eye in the laboratory was on her, waiting to see what choice she would make.
The safe option would maintain their current distance and recommend a larger expedition with dedicated research vessels. The human option would be to investigate personally, accepting the risks in pursuit of answers.
Dr. Veltai, she said finally.
In your professional opinion, what would Zalani Fleet Command recommend in this situation? The xenopsychologist's multifaceted eyes fixed on Sarah with laser intensity. Standard Zalani protocol would establish a safe perimeter and conduct exhaustive analysis before any direct approach.
The mathematical probability of hostile encounter would be calculated and weighed against potential benefits.
If the risk exceeded acceptable parameters, the site would be quarantined pending further study. And how long would that process take? Approximately 18 months to 2 years for comprehensive analysis.
Longer if the Council required consensus approval for direct investigation.
Sarah nodded slowly.
2 years of analysis while these mysteries remained unsolved, while potential threats or opportunities remained unexamined. It was a cautious approach that might be prudent, but it was also an approach that would leave critical questions unanswered.
The safe choice, she mused aloud. But not necessarily the right choice. Commander?
Dr. Lyrix's voice carried a note of confusion.
Do you not value safety?
I value safety for those under my command above everything else, Sarah replied. But sometimes the safest course in the long term requires accepting short-term risks. If that artifact represents a threat to galactic security, we need to know now, not in 2 years. She moved to the communication console.
All hands, this is the commander.
We are approaching an artifact of unknown origin and capabilities.
All departments, implement combat readiness protocols.
This is not a drill.
The transformation was immediate and dramatic.
Throughout the ship, human crew members shifted into the heightened awareness state that their species had perfected over millennia of conflict. Every system was checked and rechecked, every contingency plan reviewed, every escape route mapped. It was a response that had been honed by evolution and refined by experience. The alien crew members watched this transformation with fascination. Dr. Veltai's skin patterns became more complex as she processed the behavioral changes, while Commander Skrix's crest displayed colors that Sarah had learned indicated profound interest. They were witnessing something uniquely human, the ability to shift from exploration mode to combat readiness without losing operational efficiency.
Approaching 1,000 kilometers, navigation reported. Artifact is responding to our presence. Massive power spike detected. Red alert, Sarah commanded. All hands to stations.
The bridge transformed into a command center as alarms sounded throughout the ship.
Sarah settled into her command chair, feeling the neural interface connect with every system on the vessel.
Through the ship's sensors, she could feel the artifact's awakening power systems coming online after millennia of dormancy, energy patterns shifting from dormant to active. Commander, Dr. Veltai's voice carried across the bridge with crystalline clarity. I am detecting communication attempts from the artifact.
The signals are complex. Can you decode them?
The mathematical structure suggests linguistic patterns, but the base assumptions are unlike anything in our databases.
However,
the Zalani paused, her mind racing through possibilities. Human linguistic analysis protocols include pattern recognition algorithms designed for first contact scenarios.
Your approach might be more effective.
Sarah felt a moment of grim satisfaction. The aggressive, adaptable nature of human technology designed for conflict and uncertainty was proving more useful than the methodical approaches favored by other species.
Transfer all communication data to the Linguistics Processing Center. Full analysis. Commander, Chief Korbach's voice rumbled with warning.
The artifact's power systems are approaching dangerous levels.
If those energy patterns represent weapons, they do. The certainty in Sarah's voice surprised everyone on the bridge. Those power signatures are consistent with directed energy weapons of incredible sophistication.
Whatever built this thing expected trouble.
Should we withdraw to safe distance?
Commander Scrix asked, his ancient voice carrying the weight of eons of cautious wisdom.
Sarah stared at the artifact through the viewscreen, watching energy patterns dance across its surface like aurora. The safe choice would be retreat, put distance between her crew and whatever ancient dangers that structure might contain.
But the human choice, the choice that had carried her species from planetary surface to galactic citizenship, was different.
Negative. We maintain position and continue analysis.
Her voice carried across the bridge with absolute authority.
All departments, report status. Weapons systems online and ready. Shields at maximum efficiency. Engineering reports all systems nominal. Navigation standing by for emergency maneuvers.
The responses came with crisp precision, but Sarah could hear the underlying tension. Her crew, human and alien alike, understood that they were balanced on the edge of disaster. One wrong choice, one moment of poor judgment, and they would all die in the void between stars. Communication breakthrough, Dr. Veltai announced suddenly.
I am receiving coherent signals from the artifact. The language structure is ancient.
Predates all known galactic civilizations.
What are they saying?
The translation is approximate, but the general meaning is clear.
The Zelani's voice carried an odd note of surprise. They are asking about our intentions.
They want to know if we come in peace or war. Sarah felt the weight of the moments settling around her like armor. This was it, the critical decision that would define not just the mission, but potentially the future of human involvement in galactic exploration. A single wrong word could trigger a confrontation with technology that made their own weapons look like stone knives.
Open a channel, she commanded. All frequencies, maximum gain. Channel open.
Sarah stood from her command chair, feeling the neural interface adjust to maintain connection with the ship's systems. Every eye on the bridge was focused on her, waiting to see how a human commander would handle first contact with a civilization that had achieved technological transcendence before their species had learned to use tools. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Indomitable," she began, her voice steady and clear. "We are explorers from the Galactic Council, seeking knowledge and understanding.
We mean no harm to you or your legacy." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity.
Power patterns shifted across the artifact's surface, energy discharges that might have been weapons charging or communication arrays adjusting. Sarah could feel her crew's tension, the barely controlled readiness to fight or flee that defined every first contact scenario. "We hear your words, young species." The voice that came through the communication system was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced, not mechanical, but somehow beyond organic, as if reality itself were speaking.
"We have watched your kind for some time. You are interesting." "Watched us?"
Sarah kept her voice level despite the implications.
"How long?"
"Since your first ships reached beyond your birth world. Your species shows promise, but also concerning traits." Sarah felt Dr. Veltai's attention intensify, the xenopsychologist undoubtedly cataloging every nuance of this interaction. This was exactly the kind of moment that would define galactic perception of humanity, their first contact with a transcendent civilization, with species that had achieved everything the current galactic community could only dream of. "We are aware of our reputation," Sarah said carefully. "Our capacity for violence is not denied, but it is not our only trait.
Violence is not the concern."
The ancient voice carried something that might have been amusement. "All young species are violent. It is a necessary stage of development. The concern is what your species does with that violence as it matures."
"And what have you observed?"
"You have learned control.
Discipline. The ability to transform destructive instincts into protective ones."
The artifact's energy patterns shifted, becoming somehow less threatening.
"This is promising. But there are tests yet to come."
Sarah felt the pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place.
This wasn't a chance encounter, it was an evaluation, a test administered by beings who had transcended the limitations that still bound galactic civilization.
Humanity was being measured by standards that other species had never faced.
What kind of tests?
The kind that determine whether a species is ready for the next stage of development. Whether they can be trusted with power beyond their current comprehension.
The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just exploring ancient ruins, they were participating in some kind of cosmic evaluation, a trial that would determine humanity's future in ways they couldn't yet understand.
Commander, Dr. Veltai spoke softly, her crystalline skin pulsing with complex light patterns. I am detecting massive energy buildups throughout the sector.
This is not just one artifact, it is part of a vast network, all responding to our presence. Sarah's tactical awareness expanded as the ship's sensors revealed the truth.
What they had taken for scattered anomalies were actually components of an enormous system, energy conduits and processing nodes that stretched across hundreds of cubic light-years. They had stumbled into something far beyond a simple archaeological site. The network is activating, Chief Korvac reported, his massive hands flying over his control interfaces.
Power levels are beyond anything in our databases. If this represents weapons technology, it represents something far beyond weapons, the ancient voice interrupted. It represents choice. Your species stands at a crossroads, young commander. The path you choose will determine not just your own future, but the future of all species in this galaxy. Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, but this time it was different. This wasn't just about proving human worthiness to the Galactic Council, it was about determining whether humanity was ready to take its place among the transcendent civilizations that shaped the cosmos itself.
What choice? She asked.
The choice that defines all mature species. When given power beyond your current limitations, what will you do with it? Will you use it to dominate, to control, to impose your will on others? Or will you use it to protect, to nurture, to guide those who come after you?
The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Sarah understood now why she had been chosen for this mission, why the Council had specifically requested human participation. This wasn't about reconnaissance or exploration, it was about facing a test that only her species was prepared for. We would use it to protect, she said without hesitation. To ensure that all species have the chance to reach their potential. Words are easily spoken.
Actions reveal truth.
The energy patterns across the artifact shifted again, and Sarah felt something change in the space around them.
The test begins now. The indomitable sensors screamed as reality bent around them. Through the viewscreen, Sarah watched space itself reshape as the ancient network activated fully.
Stars shifted position, dimensions folded, and the ship found itself in a place that shouldn't exist, a pocket of structured reality where the laws of physics were subject to conscious will. Sensor readings are impossible, Dr. Lyrics reported, his voice tight with scientific disbelief.
We appear to be inside some kind of artificial space, separated from normal reality. Not separated, the ancient voice corrected.
Elevated.
You now exist in a realm where thought shapes reality, where will determines outcome. Here, your species' true nature will be revealed.
Sarah felt the change immediately, a sensation like stepping from water into air, as if fundamental limitations had been lifted from her consciousness. Through the neural interface, she could sense not just her ship's systems but the fabric of reality itself, malleable and responsive to directed intent. The test is simple, the ancient presence continued. You have been given power beyond your species' current comprehension. What will you do with it? Sarah looked around the bridge, seeing her crew staring at her with expressions of awe and terror. Dr. Veltai's crystalline skin was blazing with light patterns as her enhanced mind tried to process the impossible. Commander Scrix's ancient eyes held recognition, he had heard legends of such tests, trials that civilizations faced at the threshold of transcendence.
This was the moment that would define everything.
The choice that would determine whether humanity was ready to join the ranks of transcendent species or would remain forever bound by the limitations of material existence. The weak version of herself would have been paralyzed by the magnitude of the decision, desperate to make the choice that others expected. But that version was dead, killed by years of decisions that had forged her into something harder. She was no longer trying to prove that humans deserve trust, she was demonstrating why they had earned it. Sarah straightened in her command chair, feeling the weight of her species' hopes and fears, their triumphs and failures, their unshakable determination to prove that evolution was not destiny. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had destroyed her weak self so completely that no external force could ever break what remained. "We use it to ensure that no species ever has to face such a test alone," she said. "We become the guardians that we needed when we were young and violent and afraid." The silence that followed seemed to encompass eternity itself. Then, slowly, the ancient presence began to respond, not with words, but with something deeper, a recognition that resonated through the fabric of reality itself. "You have chosen well, young species. The path to transcendence is now open to you." As reality reassembled itself around them, Sarah felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. They had been tested and found worthy not despite their capacity for violence, but because they had learned to master it so completely that it had become irrelevant. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. The phrase echoed through her consciousness as the Indomitable returned to normal space, carrying with it the knowledge that humanity had passed its greatest test. In the laboratory, Dr. Veltai was already composing her report to the Zelani High Council. But Sarah knew that report would carry a different message than anyone had expected. Humans could be trusted, not because they were harmless, but because they had proven that strength without wisdom was meaningless, that power without restraint was mere brutality. The armor she had worn for so long, the emotional barriers that had allowed her to function under constant scrutiny, no longer felt like a burden. It had become part of her, forged by necessity and tempered by sacrifice. She was no longer trying to prove her worthiness. She had become worthy. As the stars wheeled around them in their ancient dance, Sarah Chen sat in her command chair and contemplated the future of a species that had learned to transform its greatest weakness into its greatest strength. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly as it should be. Final report. Dr. Zara Veltai, Xenopsychological Analysis Division Classified, Council Eyes Only Subject, Human Command Capability Assessment Mission, Deep Space Reconnaissance, Void Sectors. After extensive observation and analysis of human command behavior under extreme conditions, I submit the following conclusions. Human aggressive instincts, previously considered a liability for galactic cooperation, have been systematically transformed through cultural evolution into protective mechanisms of extraordinary reliability. Commander Chen's decisions throughout the mission demonstrated a command philosophy that prioritizes collective survival over individual safety, long-term stability over short-term gain, and species advancement over personal advancement. The human concept of destroying one's weak self represents a psychological maturation process that eliminates the ego-driven behaviors that typically accompany positions of power. This process creates commanders who are literally incapable of using authority for personal benefit, as their identity has become inseparable from their duty to those they serve. Recommendation: immediate elevation of human command officers to positions of authority within Council operations. The species that we feared for their capacity for violence has proven to be the most trustworthy guardians the galaxy has ever known. They do not seek power, they bear it. And that makes all the difference. End report.